Welcome back to Swayam MOOC on British Poetry and Drama, 14th to 17th century. I'm Dr. Vandana Rajoriya. I'm very happy to be with you all again. In our previous session, we saw a wife of Bath. We saw her as a woman wielding her voice like a sword, a woman who debated theology, challenged male authority, quoted scripture selectively to her purpose, and argued that her experience as a wife was greater than any book written by any of the saints or scholars. She stood at the pulpit of public opinion and dared to say, remember the words? Experience though known authority, what in this world is right enough for me to speak. But today, something shifts. In our previous discussions, we did part 1 of Wife of Bath's prologue. Now we'll be taking up part 2. And here, she'll lower her rhetorical shield. She'll move from general defense to personal confession. She'll disclose. And in her disclosures, Chaucer will give us something very powerful. Not just a controversial woman, but a layered character, a comic, confessional, cunning, and perhaps deeply wounded. Remember her interaction with Jenkins. Let's begin. But before we dive into the text, let me tell you what we'll focus on today. What I want you to take away from this session. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify and describe the different husbands the wife of Bath tells us about, and think about how and why she represents each one of them the way she does. To understand the shift in tone from public debate to personal storytelling and how it reflects, shapes our own view of Chaucer's wife herself, I want you to look closely at Chaucer's use of irony, humor, and dramatic details, not just to entertain, but also to make us question ideas about gender, authority, and storytelling. And I also want you to focus on the fifth husband, Jenkins, and see how Chaucer stages a battle not between wife and Jenkins, but between emotions, books, and ideas through them. And also answers the question, who gets to tell the story, who gets to be believed. So as we move through her many marriages, listen to her closely, not just for what she says, but also how she says it. Let us begin the journey with the first 3 husbands, because she basically says they are a type. Before we actually dive into the text, let us look at the structure of today's discussion so that you understand it well. We'll explore 4 major segments of second part of Wife of Bath's prologue, focusing on how Chaucer moves from argument to autobiography. First, we'll look at how the wife describes the husbands, especially how she frames her relationship with them, what she tells us and what she suggests, does not tell. And remember, this is important because in literature, meaning is suggested. Second, we'll examine her rhetorical strategy, how she uses speech, silence, and even deception to gain power and also defends it. Third, we'll focus on Jenkins, her fifth and most complex husband and relationship. Jenkins, who is young, educated, but abusive, and how her power dynamics with him plays out. Finally, we'll reflect upon the larger thematic concerns of Chaucer's Wife of Bath's prologue, where Chaucer very beautifully brings to life gender roles, domestic power, violence, politics of literacy, deeper questions like, the narrative of control, narrative of power. So, let us start the journey. Her first 3 husbands were old, but they were very rich. And Wife of Bath, when she starts telling about her personal adventures, she doesn't waste time in setting the tone. She directly sums up her relationship in these 3 marriages. She says the first 3 were good men, rich and old. Not one of them was strong enough to please her well. And yet she says she always managed to get what she wanted from them, and she made sure that they gave her all their land and treasure. Without shying away, she tells us that she doesn't mourn them, she manages them. She paints these husbands not as individuals but as categories: old, rich, sexually weak, and ripe for manipulation. She goes on, she says, I scolded them by day and lied to them at night. I'd accuse them of things they never even thought of. I'd weep, I'd sulk, I'd rage and cry, and all for show. No man on earth can outlie a woman when she wants to. This is the place where Wife of Bath actually, has shocked so many modern readers also. She is very boldly telling how she manipulated her husbands, how she would stay out at night and turn out when she comes back, she would only scold the husbands for it, and she would make them beg pardon over faults which were not their own. This is very important because, while it may shock us, it also tells us that Wife of Bath is one of those individuals who knows how the world in which she lives will allow her power. So all her false accusations, emotional blackmails, withholding physical affection, the strategies which she uses to gain control over all 3 of these husbands, she says that when she's doing them, she's only putting to use what God wanted her to use. She says that God gave us this sexuality so that we are in a position to, put it to good use. And she says that she wrapped her finger around her 5 husbands, and why she did what she did, because in arguments, in fights, she could not have won them. But through strategies, through manipulation, she gets her share of power and autonomy in life. She turns the household into a stage and her marriage into a game of dominance where everyone is playing games to gain dominance. Now, how do we come to terms with this? How do we understand this? What is happening here? Is Chaucer giving us a woman who understands the rules of her society better than others and confronts it? Or Chaucer is only painting a character who was criticized in her time? So Chaucer wants us to look at her favorably, or is forcing us to see the flaw in her. As we read, we'll talk about it, we'll think about it and discuss. Her first 3 husbands are basically not characters which are fully drawn by Chaucer. They are archetypes, they are props in her performance. She admits this with great pride. She says that they gave me all their land and gold. I ruled the house and I made the rules. They did as I commanded or else, and yet even as we laugh, we admire her smart cunning. Though we are left uneasy, but we still marvel at a woman in 1400s so powerful. You would wonder, is this women empowerment in real sense of the term, or it is simply a woman playing her cards, all that she has to deal with? Is she mocking the system, or she is merely surviving inside it? This is for you to think, to reflect and to answer. And we must also remember, this is not just wives speaking to us in private. She's telling this story in public to a group of pilgrims. They are all strangers and many of them are her critics also. She's not confessing to them. Remember the way she presents it? She's performing. Her voice is rehearsed, ironic and strategic, just like her marriages. She's very sure of herself. the style, the way Chaucer makes her speak, which forces us to reconsider what Chaucer wants from us to see, how Chaucer compels us to see the dynamic personality, the performance unfolding in front of her. And as she moves further, from these three husbands to her fourth husband, something changes. And with this change, Chaucer's mastery is that the tone also begins to change. The desire gives place to jealousy. The flicker of vulnerability is seen in the character of wife of Bath. This fourth husband, he arouses much discomfort for her, and the wife, she uses jealousy. She uses, her own feminine wit to get an upper edge over him. As the narrative unfolds, as Chaucer's description of the fourth husband begin to unfold, we find a marked shift in the presentation, because this husband is not old, he is not weak, and he is not also easy to manage. He is very young, he is attractive, he is a reveler, a party goer, and he also is a lecherous kind of person. He has many mistresses. We are not sure, but then yes, there could be many more. And wife tells us that she was jealous of this husband, and therefore she made him pay for every kiss he gave to the other woman. She made him jealous. She flirted with other men. She told stories of meeting men which she hints that she might never have also met. And she tells how she turned strategically, she turned jealousy into desire. She brags about how she played her own game with him and made him think that she also had many lovers. She laughed with young men just so that she could see her husband boiling with anger. She drove him mad with doubt and question. She says he would never know what was real, whether I really had those affairs or not. So she made him suffer. She seduced him using jealousy, show of false love. And when she describes, you feel that she is also a victim, but you also see that how she is also a mastermind, and how she would not settle as a victim in any of the relationships. And she said that I loved to keep him on edge. I loved to hurt him just a little, but I wept at his funeral. And she very cunningly says, with just one eye, and dried the other before the priest could have closed the book. So wife tells us that she mourned for this husband for a very brief period, and she was ready for the marriage in no time. This one eye basically becomes very important here, because she somehow hinting that I only mourned till the time it seemed respectable. So it was kind of calculated mourning, but here's what we must ask ourselves, is she really heartless, or is this what she needs to say? It is her shield, her protection, her safe space, a space in a world which denies sincerity in women and rewards only the cunningness. So there is a tension. There is a tension between the description of the first three husbands and the description which follows in the fourth husband. One thing which binds them all thematically is the need for complete control, and the performance of wife of Bath through these four relationships genuinely tells us that she is one woman who would gain sovereignty at all costs. And then as we move further into the narrative, we meet this fifth husband. Now this fifth husband, whose name is Jenkins, he is a scholar, and she falls actually in love with him. And it is so ironical, it is so sad for wife of Bath that the husband she really falls in love with, doesn't really respect her and doesn't consider her to be of any significance at all. And out of all relationships where, she longed for love, what she gets in return is pain. Not only physical pain, but also emotional pain. In this description of marriage, you enter into most dangerous of all the relationships of wife of path, where you find much of passion, pain and struggle. In Chaucer's time, women had to live their life in great restrictions. In fact, there were stories of saints abandoning their wives just because they laid their head bare on a window. And when wife of Path is presenting this story of Jenkin, in a way she is confronting them all. Jenkin is very young. He's only 23 years old and she is around 40. The relationship is now turned upside down. She is, aged and husband is young. He's not wealthy. She is wealthy. He's poor, but he's very charming. He's educated. He's literate. He's fluent in Latin. He knows his texts, his people. And she says, somehow every word she says tells us how much she fell in love with him. She gave him all his land, all his gold. In exchange of what? She longed just for love, pure love. But one thing which she expected from him was what he just couldn't give her. He did not love her truly. And it is for the first time that, wife of Path confesses that there was an imbalance in love, there was an imbalance in power. Jenkin seemed to be holding a unique power over wife of Path. As we read these descriptions, we somehow identify with wife of Path, so powerfully, because in love, you feel like giving away everything. In love, you just long for love. You do not need power. But sad as it is in life, when you long for love, hardly it is returned. So this Jenkin basically, every day he would come home, and when he would come home, he would read to wife of Path from a book of wicked wives. And in this book were stories of women who were ridiculed, who were condemned, who were criticized, who were basically criticized for very minor flaws, and not flaws in the eyes of society. And by telling these stories, he somehow forced wife of Path to remain confined in the household, to remain confined in the clutches of the established rules. And once, when all this became unbearable, once when, wife of Path just couldn't, every day, you can, imagine a situation, every day this husband comes and he reads to her from this book, tortures her. So when the torture becomes unbearable, one day what she does, she tears few pages from the book and she throws them into fire. Now this drives Jenkin crazy. He starts burning with anger and he hits her. And he hits her so powerfully that she almost drops dead. And wife very cunningly later on tells us that she acted that she lay dead. So we do not know really whether, she fainted or not. But then yes, the fact that she goes deaf because of this blow, it does tell us that, the blow was truly really very powerful. Now you can understand that this is the time when books are a very prized possession also, and you can understand that this was Jenkin's way of exercising power and absolute control over wife of Path. But from this scuffle, the dynamics change. The moment Jenkin realizes that he has possibly killed wife of Path, he immediately starts, feeling the pressure and apologizing. And this is the time from where the wife gets what she had in all other relationships, the sovereignty. So Jenkin's physical violence, Jenkin's intellectual violence it all, comes to an end with this scuffle. So from here, he promises her that he would not, read this book to her. Chaucer presents here is a war between experience and scriptures, lived experience and authority of the text. And finally, when wife of Bath successfully gets an upper edge in it, somehow, she asserts the authority of experience, the very fact with which she started her discussions in front of us. The discussions of wife of Bath's prologue in entirety, you realize that this is a master narrative, master work, where wife of Bath just doesn't tell us her story. She writes her existence, not as a saint, not as a sinner, but as a woman, a feasible, fallible woman. And in a time where you could only get angels and demons, either you had sleeping beauties or villain personified, Chaucer's wife of Bath comes out of as a very, very much alive, feasible, fallible woman. With this, we come to an end of the discussions of wife of Bath's prologue. Let us look at the major thematic concerns of the poem. First thematic concern here is the debate between experience versus authority. And authority here stands for scriptures. Authority here stands for established books, textbooks and church. And somehow wife very, very powerfully through the discussions successfully proves that experience is as valuable as the authority which is given to world by the scriptures. And she confronts this male world directly, asserting her right to speak of her own lived experience. Her tone is defiant, her argument is revolutionary, and very loudly she is asserting that my life as a woman is also as important, and the knowledge which I have gained is equally valid. Second thematic concern is marriage and power. And when she says, I governed them so well according to my own rules, they were delighted when I spoke kindly to them. Her relationship with her first three husbands, which is transactional and strategic, the way she manipulates affections, sweetness, scorn and all, somehow, what you get to understand that marriage is also a space where much of power dynamics and politics, comes to play. So it is a space where women had no property rights, no power, no authority. So third thematic concern could be, misogyny of the time, literary violence of the time. Jenkins' book of Wicked Wives, it is a symbol of centuries of male written condemnation of womanhood, right from Eve to, the present. So wife, when she tears the pages, it's basically women fighting back to patriarchy, to men who have long been painting women as evil personified, deciding the course of life for them. And this fight of wife of Bath therefore becomes, universal fight for all women of all time. Next thematic concern could be, performance and storytelling. So she says that my intent is only to entertain. She very loudly says, now listen to how I behaved myself, you wise wives who know what I mean. So with a wink, she's kind of telling her female audience, she's confessing to them that, this tale is basically a performance, and beneath the humor, there is, deep truth about claims to power, about, the reality of our existence, and wife basically is constructing a desirable, victorious womanhood. Even though, she uses pain, betrayal, but then she seem to be survival tactics in her. Another thematic concern could be, contradictions, complexity of human behavior, desire to gain control. So, desire of control is not unique to anyone, not unique to men. It is also a typical trait of women. Till now, always men had been associated with will to power, will to control, and therefore, her narrative it comes out very, very powerfully, challenging this and asserting the will to power, will to control, need to control in, all human beings. One of the most powerful strategic voices of feminist concerns from the Chaucer's time, and in painting her, Chaucer is so much ahead of his time that you really marvel at, wonder at it. Chaucer's brilliance doesn't simply lie in what wife says, but also how, she says. This is a dramatic monologue. She is telling in first, person about her own experiences. She uses direct addresses, rhetorical questions, asides to mimic real speech. Her voice leaps off the page. It is intimate, it is comic, it is accusatory. Chaucer basically makes us feel as if we are actually personally sitting in the room and listening to her speak to us live. Chaucer never allows her to conform to one chord. So this chord switching and register, constant shift which wife of Bath uses, she uses Latin chords, she uses biblical interpretations, she uses day-to-day experiences, normal, ordinary women, conversation. So this blend of high and low, sacred and profane, it creates a rich, textured, comic performance of deaf mastery. Gendered which she uses, it makes wife of Bath come out as one of the most, powerful of all the characters created by him. We also discussed throughout today's session how, Chaucer very, very beautifully mixes, high and low style, sacred and, ordinary to create a, colorful, vivid atmosphere. So, wife of Bath neither comes out as a saint nor as a complete sinner. She comes out as a feasible, fallible human being who inspires, some criticism, but also wonder, acceptance and awe in us. This is all for today. In our next lecture, we will be meeting another kind of imagination of the time, Sir Philip Sidney. So, where wife basically defended her actions with laughter and irony, Sidney will defend poetry itself as a moral and civilizing force. So, while Chaucer showed us what it means to speak from the body, in Wife of Bath, Sidney will ask us to think from the soul. The poet, basically, will inspire us, when he will bring the soul of Renaissance come alive in front of us. So, this is all for today. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.